Okay, so you want to own a t-shirt printing business. The pitch is almost irresistible. You buy a machine, you load a design, you press a button, and minutes later you have a finished product that someone will pay $20 or $30 for. The blank shirt costs you $4. The machine does the work. You collect the difference. Scale it up, put your designs on Etsy, and the income becomes passive. Or so the story goes. That is the version you see in the YouTube thumbnails, the ones with the garage full of equipment and the claim that the owner cleared $40,000 last month. Here is what those videos leave out. The machine is not the hard part. The shirt is not the hard part. The ink is not the hard part. The hard part is everything around the production, the selling, the pricing, the customer acquisition, the equipment maintenance, the labor math that most new owners never do honestly before they sign the lease or swipe the credit card. And the industry has spent the last decade being systematically disrupted by platforms that removed the production barrier entirely, which changed who the viable customer is and what they will pay, and how much margin a printer can realistically extract from any given order. By the end of this, you will understand what a t-shirt printing business actually costs to run at every meaningful scale, where the money comes from and where it reliably disappears, what the owners who make it work are doing differently from the ones who fold in year 2 with a machine they cannot sell, and why the printing method you choose in month 1 creates a business model you are largely stuck with for years. Before anything else, you need to understand that t-shirt printing is not one business. It is a category that contains at least 5 distinctly different businesses, each with different upfront costs, different variable costs per unit, different minimum order requirements, different ideal customers, and different failure modes. People who say they want to start a t-shirt printing business without specifying which type are making the same error as someone who says they want to start a restaurant without deciding whether they mean a hot dog cart or a fine dining establishment. The economics are not comparable, and treating them as though they are is how people end up with a $15,000 machine and a business model that cannot support it. The most visible entry point is screen printing. This is the oldest of the commercial methods, and at scale, still the most economically efficient for high-volume runs of designs with a limited number of colors. The process involves creating a separate screen for each color in the design, coating those screens with photosensitive emulsion, exposing them to light with a film positive of the design, and then pulling ink through each screen in sequence across the garment. A 6-color manual press, which is the typical entry setup for a serious small shop, costs somewhere between $3,000 and $12,000 depending on the brand and the number of print heads. A used Workhorse or M&R manual press in good condition can often be found in the $4,000 to $7,000 range. An automatic press, which uses a motor to rotate the pallets and allows 1 or 2 operators to produce far higher volumes, starts at around $30,000 and goes up from there. The equipment is only part of the screen printing setup cost. You also need a dark room or exposure unit to burn screens, which cost between $500 and $3,000. You need a flash cure unit to partially set ink between colors on multicolor designs, which runs between $500 and $1,500. You need a conveyor dryer to fully cure the finished shirts, and a good dryer starts at around $2,000 and can cost $20,000 or more for a large automatic compatible belt dryer. You need emulsion, film, cleaning chemicals, and the screens themselves. A single aluminum screen costs between $20 and $50, and a working shop needs dozens of them. A complete manual screen printing setup, if you're buying new and building it out properly, is realistically $15,000 to $25,000 before you print a single shirt. That number surprises almost everyone who starts with the machine price. The cost structure in screen printing has a characteristic that makes it fundamentally different from every other printing method. There is a setup cost that exists per design, per color, not per shirt. Every time you want to print a design that has 3 colors, you burn 3 screens. That process takes time, burns emulsion and film, and requires cleaning and reclaiming the screens afterward. For a shop charging setup fees, this might mean $40 to $80 per color billed to the customer. For a shop trying to compete on price by waiving setups, it means absorbing that cost internally. At low volumes, the setup cost is so significant relative to the per-shirt production cost that screen printing is genuinely uneconomical for small orders. At high volumes, the per-shirt economics become excellent. Ink costs in screen printing run roughly 25 cents to 60 cents per shirt for a standard design, depending on coverage and ink type. The setup is already paid. The screens are already burned. The machine can run 500 shirts in an hour with 2 operators. The math at that volume is very different from the math on a 12-shirt order. This is why screen printing businesses spend so much energy chasing volume customers. The model wants corporate accounts, school districts, athletic programs, large event organizers, bands with substantial followings, and anyone else who places orders in the hundreds rather than the dozens. A shop running 300 shirts for a regional high school track team at $12 per shirt with a $4 blank and 50 cents of ink and $1 of labor per shirt is making $6.50 per shirt on 300 shirts, which is $1,950 of gross profit on a single order. A shop running 12 shirts for a family reunion at $18 per shirt with the same costs and 3 screens to burn is making maybe $150 total while taking longer to set up than to print. The volume incentive is enormous, and the shops that do not understand this early enough spend years chasing the wrong customer at the wrong margin. Direct-to-garment printing, typically called DTG, enters the story as the technology that was supposed to solve the minimum order problem. A DTG printer operates like an inkjet printer, except that the substrate is a t-shirt clamped onto a platen rather than a sheet of paper. There is no screen preparation, no emulsion, no setup in the traditional sense. You load a design file, you clamp the shirt, you press start, and the machine prints directly onto the fabric. The appeal to anyone who has struggled with screen printing setup time is obvious. A single shirt with a full-color photographic design becomes practical in a way that screen printing cannot match. DTG gave the industry the ability to fulfill one-piece orders economically, which is a capability that did not meaningfully exist before the technology matured around 2015. The machines are expensive and technically demanding in ways that are frequently undersold in the sales pitch. An entry-level DTG printer from a brand like Brother, Cornet, or Epson costs between $15,000 and $30,000. A production-grade machine with faster throughput and higher reliability costs $50,000 to over $500,000. The Cornet Atlas, which is used by large fulfillment operations, is a machine whose price starts around $300,000. For most small shop operators, the realistic entry point is something in the $15,000 to $30,000 range, often financed. Analytically, the cost per shirt ink printing in DTG is significantly higher than in screen printing. Ink for a typical full front design on a dark shirt, which requires a white underbase layer before the color layers, typically runs between $2 and $4 per shirt, depending on coverage, design complexity, and the machine's ink efficiency. On a light shirt with a simple design, the ink cost might be closer to $1. But dark shirts are more common in many markets, and full coverage designs are exactly what customers request most often. The pre-treatment step is non-negotiable for dark garments and adds both a consumable cost and a process step. Pre-treatment chemicals run roughly 15 to 40 cents per shirt, but the bigger issue is that pre-treatment needs to be applied evenly and heat-cured before printing, which adds time to every dark shirt order. Maintenance is the variable that kills DTG profitability for unprepared operators. The printheads in a DTG machine are filled with water-based textile ink that will clog if the machine sits idle for more than a day or two without proper maintenance. Shops that are not running the machine daily need to run cleaning cycles that consume ink without producing product. A head cleaning on a Brother GTX can use several milliliters of ink, and the machine running 5 cleaning cycles a week without producing shirts is burning through material with nothing to show for it. Head replacements, which become necessary eventually, can cost several hundred to over $1,000 per head, and a machine with multiple heads may need replacement on any of them. Operators who underestimate maintenance costs frequently discover that their effective per-shirt cost is considerably higher than their initial calculations suggested. Direct-to-film printing, called DTF, has emerged in the last several years as a genuinely disruptive technology within the decorated apparel space. The process involves printing a design onto a special film, applying a powdered adhesive, curing it with heat, and then heat pressing the resulting transfer onto a garment. The transfer adheres without requiring any special treatment of the garment, which means it works on polyester blends, nylon, cotton, and virtually any fabric that can withstand heat pressing. DTG requires pre-treatment for dark garments and works best on certain cotton compositions. DTF has no such restrictions. A DTF printer setup, typically a converted wide-format inkjet printer with a powder applicator and curing unit, costs between $5,000 and $30,000 for a competent entry-level system. The film and powder consumables add roughly 50 cents to $1.50 per transfer for a standard design. The finished transfers can be stocked in advance and pressed as orders come in, which gives DTF a flexibility that neither screen printing nor DTG offers. A shop can print a batch of transfers on a slow day and press them on a busy day without the quality degradation that would occur if you try to apply that kind of flexibility to a screen printing setup. The competitive threat DTF poses to established screen printers is real. Small shops that previously required a screen printing setup to offer professionally finished custom garments can now produce comparable results at low volumes with significantly lower equipment investment. The per-unit cost of a DTF transfer is higher than the per-unit ink cost of high-volume screen printing. But the absence of setup time and the flexibility across fabric types makes DTF compelling for shops that primarily serve small-order customers. Many established screen printing shops now run DTF alongside their press as a solution for the 1 to 12-piece orders that would have been unprofitable on screen printing alone. Heat transfer vinyl, often called HTV, represents the lowest barrier entry into the decorated apparel business and also, in most cases, the lowest ceiling. A vinyl cutter from Cricut, Silhouette, or a professional brand like Roland cuts designs from sheets of colored vinyl, which are then weeded to remove the negative space and heat pressed onto garments. The equipment cost is low, starting under $200 for a hobbyist cutter and going up to $2,000 or $3,000 for a commercial-grade machine. The vinyl sheets cost between $1 and $5 per sheet depending on the type, and a single sheet can produce multiple transfers depending on design size. For small volumes of simple designs, the margins look reasonable on paper. The ceiling is the problem. Vinyl printing works beautifully for names on athletic jerseys, simple single-color logos, and personalized items. It does not work well for full-color photographic designs, for large quantities of the same design, or for production scenarios where speed matters. The weeding process, removing the excess vinyl from around the cut design, is time-intensive and difficult to mechanize. A shop producing 50 personalized jersey numbers per day is doing 50 individual cuts, 50 individual weeds, and 50 individual presses by hand. The labor math deteriorates quickly at any meaningful scale, and the product range is restricted by what the medium can realistically produce. Embroidery sits adjacent to all of these methods as a service that many decorated apparel shops offer alongside printing. The equipment, a commercial multi-head embroidery machine, starts at roughly $5,000 for a single head unit and climbs to $20,000 and above for production machines. Embroidery adds perceived value to a finished product in ways that print sometimes cannot match, particularly on polo shirts, caps, and workwear. Corporate accounts frequently want embroidered logos for uniforms, and the durability of embroidery on work garments is genuinely superior to most printed alternatives. A shop that combines screen printing for bulk t-shirts with embroidery for caps and polos serves a broader range of corporate needs and is harder for a competitor to displace. The blank shirt cost is the number that drives everything downstream, and it is where most new operators make their first significant miscalculation. When someone builds a business model around selling custom shirts for $15 each, they need to know exactly what the shirt itself costs them before labor, ink, and overhead enter the picture. A Gildan 64,000 soft-style t-shirt, which is probably the most commonly printed shirt in the American custom market, costs roughly $2 to $3 per unit at quantities of 100 to 300 shirts, and slightly less at higher volumes. A Bell & Canvas 30001, which has become the preferred blank for retail-quality custom printing and print-on-demand brands, costs roughly $4 to $6 per unit at typical shop quantities. A next-level apparel shirt or a similar premium blank can cost $6 to $8 or more. The brand choice is not merely aesthetic. It shapes who the customer is and what they will pay. A corporate client ordering 500 shirts for a company event probably expects Gildan quality blanks and will resist paying the premium that a Bell & Canvas order commands. A boutique brand selling custom designs through its own Shopify store needs the retail quality feel of a premium blank to justify a $25 to $30 retail price. The shops that use cheap blanks to serve premium customers or that use premium blanks in high-volume commodity orders are pricing themselves out of the right market in both directions. Minimum viable order quantities in screen printing create a structural problem that many new shop owners do not fully understand until they are trying to close their first sale. If your setup cost is $20 per color and a design has 3 colors, you are spending $60 before you print anything. On a 12-shirt order, you need to recover $60 of setup across 12 units, which is $5 per shirt just for setup. Add your blank at $3, your ink at 50 cents, your labor at $2, and your overhead at $1, and your cost per shirt is $11.50 before you have made a single dollar of profit. At a $15 retail price, you're making $3.50 per shirt gross margin on a 12-piece order, which is $42 total for what might be an hour of setup plus 30 minutes of actual printing. That is not a viable business model. It is the reason screen printing shops push hard for minimum order quantities of 24, 48, or 72 pieces, and why they charge setup fees that customers often find confusing. The labor question is where the financial projections of most aspiring print shop owners fail most badly. Labor in a print shop is expensive relative to the retail price of the product in ways that are not obvious until you are inside the operation. Screen printing and automatic press at full speed might produce 600 shirts per hour. But the press is not running at full capacity for 8 hours a day. There is setup time, teardown time, reclaim time, order changeover time, quality rejection and reprinting, and all the other activity that fills a production day without producing finished goods. When you divide your total labor cost by your actual finished shirt output rather than your theoretical maximum output, the per unit labor cost is almost always higher than the initial projection. DTG labor presents differently. The machine does more of the physical work, but the labor shifts to pre-treatment application, platen loading and unloading, quality checking, and machine maintenance. A single DTG machine printing 15 to 30 shirts per hour requires continuous operator attention. At $15 per hour for an operator and 20 shirts per hour of actual throughput, the direct labor is 75 cents per shirt, which sounds reasonable until you add the machine's downtime for maintenance and cleaning cycles. The customer acquisition problem is the thing that sinks the largest percentage of print shop businesses, and it is the variable that gets the least attention in the business opportunity content that surrounds this industry. A person who invests $20,000 in equipment and learns to operate it competently has solved the production problem. They have not solved the selling problem, which in most markets is considerably harder. The local custom apparel market is more competitive than it looks from outside. Every city of any size has multiple established screen printers, and many of them have been operating for 20 or 30 years, have relationships with the school districts, the athletic programs, the corporate accounts, and the event organizers that drive consistent volume orders. A new shop entering that market needs to displace existing relationships or find customers that the established shops are not serving well. The internet appeared to escape from local competition by opening the entire country as a potential customer base. And for some operators, it has. The internet also opened every shop in the country to competition with every other shop in the country, which compressed prices in ways that are visible in the quotes customers can generate instantly through online ordering platforms. Sites like Custom Ink and similar national platforms have trained the consumer to expect a certain price point for a certain volume order, and the local shop that cannot meet or beat that price on comparable quality is at a structural disadvantage for price-sensitive customers. The local shop's advantage is relationship, turnaround time, the ability to handle unusual orders or rush jobs, and the trust that comes from being physically present in the community. Those advantages are real. They are also harder to quantify and harder to market than a lowest price guarantee. Print-on-demand platforms have done something more disruptive to the retail side of the decorated apparel market than almost any other technology shift. Services like Printful, Printify, and Merch by Amazon allow anyone with a design and an e-commerce storefront to offer t-shirts with no inventory, no equipment, and no upfront production cost. When a customer orders through a Printful-powered Shopify store, Printful prints the shirt on one of their DTG machines and ships it directly to the customer. The store owner never touches the shirt. The typical Printful cost for a standard t-shirt starts around $12 to $14 wholesale, which the store owner retails for $20 to $35 and pockets the margin. The existence of this model does not make the print shop irrelevant, but it does define very clearly what the print shop must do better than print on demand to justify its existence. Print on demand cannot serve a customer who needs 200 matching shirts by Friday. It cannot produce the bright spot colors of plastisol screen printing that photograph well for athletic programs. It cannot offer the same kind of hands-on consultation and sample review that a corporate client expects when spending $10,000 on uniform shirts. The viable custom apparel business post-print on demand is one that wins on what print on demand structurally cannot provide: speed, local service, high volume efficiency, or specialty capabilities. The pricing model in the custom apparel business is an area where new operators routinely leave money on the table or lose orders they should have won. Most shops use a tiered pricing structure where the per-unit price decreases as quantity increases, which reflects the genuine economics of production. What varies is how aggressively different shops price that curve. A shop competing on price against online platforms is usually competing from a position of structural disadvantage, unless they have equipment or labor costs that are genuinely below market. A shop competing on service, turnaround, capability, or relationship is in a position to charge more per unit and should. The business that makes money consistently in custom apparel is typically running a portfolio of customer types, rather than relying on a single segment. Corporate and promotional accounts provide the consistent volume that keeps presses running and overhead covered. Event-based customers, festival merchandise, charity runs, sports leagues, provide seasonal revenue spikes that can be very profitable if managed correctly. Retail-oriented customers, small brands selling their own designs through their own channels, provide an opportunity for shops to serve as a production partner rather than just a commodity printer, which command higher pricing and more loyalty. A shop that has all three customer types is not as vulnerable to the loss of any single account as a shop whose revenue is 90% dependent on the local school system contract. The numbers that actually define whether a custom apparel business is viable come down to what the industry calls the machine utilization rate combined with the realized margin per shirt. A DTG machine that costs $25,000, financed at a reasonable rate, carries a monthly cost of approximately $500 to $600 in principal and interest. That machine also needs consumables, maintenance, and operator labor. If the machine is running at 30% of its capacity, producing perhaps 400 finished shirts per week, the fixed cost per shirt is relatively high. If the machine is running at 80% capacity and producing 1,100 shirts per week, the fixed cost per shirt is far more manageable. The economics of every piece of printing equipment are fundamentally about utilization, and the shops that struggle are almost always shops that are not generating enough order volume to keep their equipment meaningfully busy. A screen printing shop running a 6-color automatic press needs approximately 8,000 to 12,000 shirts per month of consistent production volume to be operating at the utilization rate where the economics are genuinely attractive. A shop producing 3,000 shirts per month on the same press is paying the same fixed costs for a fraction of the output. That gap between fixed costs and production volume is what kills printing businesses in years 2 and 3 after the initial excitement of ownership has faded and the reality of consistent customer acquisition has become apparent. What the businesses that survive and grow consistently look like is fairly predictable. They have at minimum one person whose primary job is sales and customer development, which is separate from anyone operating equipment. They have chosen a primary market segment and developed real expertise in serving it rather than trying to take any order from any customer. They have a pricing structure that reflects their actual costs, including labor, overhead, and equipment amortization, and they have resisted the temptation to chase volume by pricing themselves into unsustainable margins. They have relationships with their blank shirt suppliers that give them access to consistent pricing and reliable inventory. And they have a realistic understanding of what their equipment can produce in a real working week, not a theoretical maximum production run. The business that fails follows a recognizable pattern as well. Equipment purchased at the peak of enthusiasm. Initial orders from friends, family, and social media followers that create an illusion of demand that does not persist. Prices set by looking at competitors rather than by calculating actual costs. Discovery in month 6 or 9 that the margins on the orders they have been winning are too thin to cover all the costs they are actually incurring. A pivot to selling on Etsy or Amazon that runs into the print-on-demand price ceiling. Equipment that is now partly paid for but not generating enough volume to service the debt. A decision in month 18 or 24 that the machine can be sold for a fraction of what was paid for it and the whole experience written off as a learning cost. The decorated apparel industry in the United States is a substantial business. It generates over $10 billion per year in revenue, and there are successful independent print shops operating in markets of every size, from single-operator home studios to multi-press shops employing dozens of people. The opportunity is real. The path to capturing it is also well documented by the experience of the people who have done it, and the experience is nearly uniform. The technology is learnable. The production is manageable. The thing that determines whether the business works or does not work is almost never the quality of the printing. It is the quality of the selling, the disciplined management of the cost structure, and the willingness to serve fewer customers better rather than every customer poorly.